In 1962, director David Lean would release a film that would come to be his magnum opus. That film was Lawrence of Arabia. The film tells the story of one of history's most complex and interesting individuals, T.E. Lawrence, or as he would become more famously known as Lawrence of Arabia. You have most likely heard of the film before, and it's for good reason. It's truly a one-of-a-kind film, from the star-studded cast that gives some of their best performances to the enchanting music that draws you into the film. Every aspect of the film screams quality. The jaw-dropping cinematography so perfectly captures the environments and the mythical landscapes that are the deserts of Arabia. It takes you into an almost alien world that you could just stare at for hours, just absorbing all of the detail packed into the frame. There is always something that captures your attention, whether it be its epic battle sequences or its more intimate character-focused moments. There's never a dull scene in the film. All of it is wrapped up by the grand story of T.E. Lawrence, and Lean presents it in the biggest fashion possible. While the film is astounding in so many ways, the production behind it is a whole nother story, and in this video I'm going to take you behind the camera to show you the staggering production and the insane effort it took to make Lawrence of Arabia. David Lean may have been the first person to successfully create a film on T.E. Lawrence, but it won't shock you to know that many people had tried to make a film based on Lawrence's life and his role in the Arab revolt during World War I way before Lean ever did. Early pioneers of cinema like John Ford wanted to make a film on T.E. Lawrence, but it never materialized. Lawrence was a popular and very interesting individual, but he was also a mysterious figure, with his story coming from embellished tales of his exploits. The general public only knew of his almost mythical achievements rather than the actual man Lawrence really was. After Lawrence's death in 1935, his legend only grew and his story seemed ripe for a cinematic adaptation. Even long before his untimely death, many people had tried to make a film version on Lawrence's exploits, and one of the earliest known attempts that I can find any information on came in 1926 with director Rex Ingram. Ingram had taken an interest in Lawrence's story after he read his book, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which had just come out. Ingram approached Lawrence about making a film on his life, and the two corresponded over letters for a period of time, but nothing ever came of Ingram's attempt. After Lawrence published 7 Pillars of Wisdom in 1926, he found himself in quite a bit of debt. This is because he didn't want to be seen as profiting from the Arab revolt, so took no royalties from the book. This debt was a problem for Lawrence, and led to him trying to sell the film rights to the book in order to clear his debt. He first tried to sell them to Herbert Wilcox, a well-known British film producer at the time. Wilcox turned Lawrence down, however, believing that his story wouldn't make for good cinema. If only Wilcox could have seen 36 years into the future to see just how wrong he was. Lawrence's offer to Wilcox would be the first and last time Lawrence ever offered the film rights to his book. Lawrence was never a fan of cinema and only offered the film rights more out of desperation than any dream to see his story presented on the big screen. In 1927, English actor and aspiring producer M.A. Wetherell was looking to make a film about T. Lawrence after reading about him in the abridged version of 7 Pillars of Wisdom called Revolt in the Desert. A young and upcoming cinematographer called Freddie Young was attached to Wetherell's project as a cinematographer. Freddie had previously worked on Wetherell's The Somme from 1927 as a second camera operator, but unfortunately for Wetherell and Freddie, Lawrence had turned down Wetherell's offer as he was no longer interested in selling the film rights to his book. Lawrence had managed to clear his debt after abridging and publishing Revolt in the Desert, which, by its 4th reprint, had paid off the debt from 7 Pillars of Wisdom. While Freddie didn't get to be cinematographer on Wetherell's failed Lawrence project, he would get another chance to be cinematographer for a Lawrence film a little bit later. It wouldn't be until 1934 when another attempt to make a film on Lawrence's life happened. Founder of London Films, Alexander Korda, was interested in producing a film on Lawrence's life based on 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Before Korda had even secured the rights from Lawrence, he attached Leslie Howard to star in the film and wanted to have Louis Milestone to direct the film. Milestone was well known for directing the 1930 version of All Quiet on the Western Front, and he seemed like the perfect choice to helm an epic based on Lawrence's life, but sadly the project was not to be. Lawrence decided to turn down Korda's offer, but he would meet with Korda again in 1935 to once more discuss making a film about him. By the end of the meeting, Korda had agreed to wait until Lawrence had either approved the project or waited until Lawrence had died. Lawrence likely never had any intention of approving Korda's proposal and just wanted to stall him for as long as possible, since Lawrence went on to state that he didn't want any films being made during his lifetime, essentially killing any further attempts while he was still alive. Lawrence was also known to be extremely uncooperative concerning film projects based on him, and he often tried to sabotage any attempt he could. This would help explain why all of the attempts failed while Lawrence was still alive. What Lawrence probably wasn't expecting when he made that agreement with Korda was that he would be tragically killed in a motorcycle accident only 5 months after his meeting with him. After Lawrence's death, Korda immediately tried to reignite his previous attempt at making a film on Lawrence since he was now dead. Korda started to attract potential directors and stars to his project, but it would quickly fall apart for a couple of reasons. The first reason was the growing relationship between Turkey and the United Kingdom. A film about Lawrence was seen as harmful to this new friendship, and the British government didn't want to risk potentially damaging this new relationship. The second reason was after Lawrence's death, his estate and most of his copyright passed to his younger brother, Arnold Walter Lawrence. Arnold was now in control of the film rights to Seven Pillars of Wisdom and was not interested in selling the film rights to Korda. This and the pressure from the British government effectively killed the project. However, Korda wasn't one to give up and tried again in 1937 with Brian Desmond Hurst set to direct this time. Once again, the project ran into issues and was eventually shelved. Korda was very interested in T. Lawrence's life and him as a person, finding his story to be perfect cinema. Only a year later, in 1938, Korda would try again, and this time he was able to attract famous actor Laurence Olivier to star as Lawrence. Like all of Korda's attempted Lawrence projects, this one ran into issues and only ever got to the planning stage before being scrapped. After Korda's 1938 attempt failed, he decided to shelve the idea of making a film on Lawrence for a number of years in favour of more fruitful projects. That was until, in the early 50s, where he once again reignited his old attempt at trying to get a film made on T.E. Lawrence. This time Korda was able to attract the attention of Columbia Pictures and its president Harry Cohn. Cohn was able to attach Cary Grant as a star, and the project was offered to British filmmaking duo Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. The duo had made 3 films that were produced by Korda's London Films, and those 3 films had been distributed by British Lion Films, which Korda was heavily involved with. Powell and Pressburger decided to reject the offer, and instead the project was offered to David Lean, who had just done a film with London Films and British Lion Films called The Sound Barrier, which was a moderate critical and commercial success. Lean was interested in the offer because he and his frequent collaborator Norman Spencer had wanted to do a film on Lawrence for a while, so the proposal was perfect for Lean. While the project was making good progress, they still needed the approval of A.W. Lawrence. He turned the project down, as he didn't approve of the script and the proposed casting. A.W. Lawrence also didn't like the studio system and was suspicious of Hollywood producers tampering with his brother's story. By early 1954, the project was going nowhere without A.W. Lawrence's approval, and Lean left it for greener pastures, going on to make Summertime with London Films. Without Lean directing and A.W. Lawrence's approval, Columbia saw the project as dead and gave up on it. Without the support of Columbia or Lean directing, the project was effectively over and Korda had to shelve it once again. Most of Korda's later attempts failed because A.W. Lawrence kept denying Korda's proposals, and without his approval, Korda's projects were going nowhere. A.W. Lawrence, just like his older brother, was not particularly interested in selling the film rights to Seven Pillars of Wisdom, and he was protective over his brother's legacy, not wanting to see it ruined by some producer that cared little for his brother's story or character, and was only interested in the rights because of the potential to make money. In 1955, screenwriter Terence Rattigan, who had written Lean's The Sound Barrier, wrote a screenplay of Lawrence's life for his friend and frequent collaborator, Anthony Asquith. Rattigan managed to attract Dirk Bogarde to star as Lawrence, and the project was making good progress. Unlike previous attempts, the Rattigan version didn't rely on Seven Pillars of Wisdom, bypassing the strict approval from A.W. Lawrence. A.W. Lawrence had read Rattigan's version, and he wasn't a fan, so I really doubt he would have approved it, even if Rattigan had asked for his permission. By 1958, Rattigan's film project was making good ground, but the cracks in the production were starting to show. The proposed high budget was spiraling out of control, and later that year it was supposed to start filming in Iraq. But the July 14th revolution in Iraq and the death of King Faisal II caused the country to devolve into political turmoil, making it extremely unsafe to film in, killing any chance it had. Rattigan decided to give up on the idea of making a film on Lawrence and converted his script into a stage play called Ross, which would premiere in London's West End in May 1960. Alec Guinness would star as Lawrence in the play. Guinness would also later play Prince Faisal in David Lean's film. After Ratigan's failed attempt, there was no major endeavour to make a film on T. Lawrence until David Lean and producer Sam Spiegel started discussing Lean's next project. Lean, after finishing Summertime, had moved on to a much bigger project and had just finished The Bridge on the River Kwai, which turned out to be a massive critical and commercial success, winning Lean great praise for his work. Spiegel had produced The Bridge on the River Kwai with his production company called Horizon Pictures, and wanting another huge hit from Lean, quickly got to discussing what Lean wanted to do next. After many ideas were thrown around, Lean finally settled on a film about T.E. Lawrence. Lean wanted to make a film on Lawrence for a while, and he knew coming off the success of The Bridge on the River Kwai that it would be the perfect opportunity to do so. Spiegel attracted the interest of Columbia Pictures, who had just distributed The Bridge on the River Kwai for Lean and Spiegel. Columbia took an interest in Lean's new Lawrence project due to the success of The Bridge on the River Kwai and their previous attachment to the attempt in 1952. With Columbia Pictures on board, Spiegel and Lean felt safe to continue pursuing the project. Spiegel hired Michael Wilson, who had written The Bridge on the River Kwai with Carl Foreman, both of which never received credit at the time due to the Hollywood blacklist. Wilson wrote a treatment on T.E. Lawrence, and he based his treatment off of biographies written on Lawrence by journalists such as Lowell Thomas. Spiegel made Wilson do this, in hopes of impressing Arnold Lawrence and to help convince him to sell Spiegel the film rights. Lean and Spiegel also met with Arnold many times in order to convince him to sell them the film rights, and initially Arnold was hesitant due to him thinking Lean and Spiegel were just some Hollywood producers that would destroy his brother's story and legacy. After many meetings, his opinion started to change on the pair, and after he read Wilson's treatment and was shown The Bridge on the River Kwai, he was impressed enough to sell Spiegel the rights under some conditions. These conditions were total script approval along with being able to revoke the use of the film's title being 7 Pillars of Wisdom if he did not approve of the script and the final version of the film. Arnold would actually revoke the use of the title 7 Pillars of Wisdom and his support of the production after being shown a rough cut of the film without any music. He was dissatisfied with how the film had turned out and how it had left a lot of Lawrence's complexities out of the film, although I personally somewhat disagree with his take. By the time Arnold had voiced his concerns, it didn't matter much, as Spiegel and Lean had already settled on calling the film Lawrence of Arabia. With the film rights secured from Arnold, Lean and Spiegel started moving the project into pre-production. While Lean was busy with some of the pre-production work, Spiegel went around buying the rights to various books on T.E. Lawrence to make sure there weren't any rights complications with their version. In a strange twist of fate, Spiegel actually bought the rights to Ratigan's version. Ratigan had sold the rights to his screenplay to Herbert Wilcox. And yes, it was the same Herbert Wilcox who had turned down Lawrence all those years earlier. Spiegel put Wilson to work writing the script, and Wilson had major problems when writing the script, taking him over 2 years to finish it. The initial script ran for about 400 pages long, and after Lean had finished reading it, he absolutely hated it and wanted the script to be rewritten. However, Lean didn't want Wilson to rewrite it and decided to start looking for a new writer to replace Wilson. Lean eventually found Robert Bolt. Bolt had just written the play A Man for All Seasons, which was a hit when it premiered in the West End in 1960. By the time Bolt was found and hired, the production had already started in Jordan, and Bolt had to be flown out to Aqaba, Jordan. There, he quickly wrote a new script on Spiegel's yacht. Bolt based his revised script off Wilson's initial script, changing many aspects of the dialogue. Lean preferred Bolt's revised version a lot more, and that was the one that was used for the film. Due to how little time Bolt had to write the script, he was only able to get the first part of the script done. When the production on the film took a break, Bolt returned to England to finish writing the second half. While Bolt was in England finishing up the script, he decided to take part in a demonstration against nuclear bombs. He managed to get himself arrested and end up in jail for a month for not signing a paper stating he wouldn't protest against nuclear bombs again. When Spiegel heard that Bolt had been arrested and was in jail, he went absolutely ballistic. Outrageous! Spiegel couldn't have Bolt be off in jail and not writing the script for a month, as it would set the production back, costing Spiegel time and money, something he was slowly running out of. Spiegel met with Bolt to try and convince him to sign the paper, saying he wouldn't do it again. Bolt, after a lot of convincing from Spiegel, reluctantly signed the paper and was let out, only serving 2 weeks in jail. Bolt never forgave himself for signing the paper, and after the movie was finished, he never spoke to Spiegel ever again. With Bolt out of jail, he was free to finish the second part of the script, just in time for filming to start again. Bolt has a small cameo in the film as this British officer right here, who is watching Lawrence talk to General Allenby after he comes back from his victory at Aqaba. Bolt wasn't the only one to be pressured into signing something due to his political beliefs. Michael Wilson also had trouble with Spiegel for the same reason. At the time of Wilson writing the initial script, he was blacklisted in Hollywood due to his political beliefs, and he refused Spiegel's request to sign a letter renouncing those beliefs. Because of this, Wilson was never credited for writing Lawrence of Arabia, even though Bolt's script is based off his original script that he wrote for Spiegel and Lean. Disputes over who really wrote the script went on long after the film had been released, and Wilson's writing credit was only restored after the Writers Guild of America found that he deserved a writing credit on the film, which was awarded after his death in 1978. Today, we can look at the cast of Lawrence of Arabia and see how absolutely stacked it was for the time. There are so many great British and American actors, along with a couple of amazing international actors as well. It might surprise you to know that when the film came out, some of these actors were virtually unknown, with Lawrence of Arabia being their first big break. While the film had a great cast, it took ages to actually assemble the full cast, with Lean and Spiegel having huge issues with some of the roles. The role of T.E. Lawrence was one of the hardest roles to cast. The role was originally given to Marlon Brando, and Columbia Pictures held a press conference in early 1960 to announce the film and confirm Brando would be playing Lawrence. However, shortly after this conference, Brando decided to drop out of the production, preferring to take the role of Fletcher Christian in the 1962 remake of Mutiny on the Bounty. The production of that film is a whole nother video for another day. With Brando out, they needed to find someone else, and the next person that was cast as Lawrence was Albert Finney. He was, at the time, a well-known London stage actor, but he wasn't particularly well known for starring in films. Before the part was offered to Finney, he had to do some screen tests in Lawrence's Bedouin clothing. Here is a picture of Finney in that clothing. After the screen tests were done, Lean and the other production members thought that Finney had done a good job and they offered him the role. Finney, however, decided to turn it down. As if he was to accept the role, he would have had to sign a multi-picture contract with Sam Spiegel, something he had no interest in doing. Albert Finney's screen tests can actually still be viewed today, and they are held in the BFI National Archive. The screen tests are still under the title of 7 Pillars of Wisdom, as by this point, Lean and Spiegel hadn't yet changed the name. Finney's screen tests are one of the most requested items to be viewed out of the entire archive. With Finney turning down the role, Lean had to keep searching, and he would find his next actor from the most unlikely of sources. At the time, Lean was married to an Indian woman called Leela Matkar, and she travelled around with a guru. The guru had gone to see a film called The Day They Robbed the Bank of England and saw a virtually unknown actor by the name of Peter O'Toole in the film, playing the role of a young English army officer. The guru told Lean about O'Toole, thinking he would be perfect for the role of Lawrence.
I didn't know they knew about fishing in America.
Lean decided to view the film for himself, and once he was finished watching the film, he knew O'Toole was the perfect man for the role. O'Toole was in Stratford-upon-Avon, playing the character of Shylock in the play The Merchant of Venice, when he got the call from David Lean asking if he would like to come up to London to have a meeting with him concerning the role of Lawrence in his upcoming film. O'Toole agreed and travelled down to London. During the meeting, the two talked for hours before Lean asked O'Toole if he would like to do a screen test, and O'Toole agreed. O'Toole did a screen test in a studio with Lawrence's Bedouin clothing on, along with other outfits. He stood next to a pile of sand, similar to how Finney did his screen tests. After the screen test was done, O'Toole went away, leaving time for Lean to decide if he wanted to offer him the role of Lawrence. The following day, Lean had made up his mind and offered O'Toole the role. Before O'Toole accepted the role, he wanted to read the script, and after reading it, O'Toole later stated in an interview that he told Lean,
I said, it is the most beautiful adventure story. And David said, that bad?
The script O'Toole first read was Wilson's script, and his response to the script was a factor in Lean's decision to replace Wilson. David asked O'Toole who were the playwrights around, since O'Toole was in those circles from his stage acting, and O'Toole recommended his friend Robert Bolt. O'Toole's recommendation of Bolt was another reason he was hired. Knowing Bolt was writing the script, O'Toole felt more comfortable accepting the role as he knew of Bolt's talent. When Sam Spiegel heard that Peter O'Toole had been cast as Lawrence, he wasn't happy. Spiegel didn't like O'Toole ever since O'Toole had pulled a prank on him. I'm not exactly sure what the prank was or how severe it was, but knowing Spiegel's character, he probably blew it way out of proportion. Lean didn't really care about the prank and wanted O'Toole, so he put his foot down and demanded O'Toole be cast as Lawrence. Spiegel eventually relented and reluctantly allowed him to be cast as Lawrence. This was one of the many instances of Lean and Spiegel butting heads, something that would dominate their working relationship. While O'Toole had accepted the role of Lawrence, it wasn't the only film he had accepted the role for. O'Toole had already committed to the role of King Henry II in another upcoming film called Becket. O'Toole was set to start rehearsals for the film, and when the director of Becket, Peter Glenville, found out that O'Toole had accepted the role of Lawrence for David Lean, he refused to release O'Toole from his production. The only problem for Glenville was he and O'Toole had never signed any written agreements about O'Toole not being able to sign onto and work on other projects while working on Becket, so Glenville couldn't do anything about O'Toole working on Lawrence, and he went off with David Lean instead. O'Toole did come back to do Becket with Glenville later, and the film would turn out to be a success. With O'Toole now securing the role of Lawrence, he flew out to Jordan early in order to learn how to ride a camel properly, something he would be doing a lot of in the film. He would also learn how to wear Bedouin clothing properly and get used to the climate of the Middle East. O'Toole met with King Hussein of Jordan, who had given Lean and Spiegel permission to film in the country and use his army. King Hussein would also introduce O'Toole to his desert patrol, and they would teach him how to ride his camel properly. O'Toole's instructor was Kutufan Abutai, who was the grandson of Auda Abutai.
I'm Auda Abutai.
Auda had participated in the Arab Revolt and knew T. Lawrence. Anthony Quinn plays the character of Auda Abutai in Lawrence of Arabia, and I will get onto Anthony Quinn's casting a little later. O'Toole would spend 9 months with the Desert Patrol, and out of those 9 months, he would spend 3 of them learning how to ride a camel. O'Toole found it hard and uncomfortable to ride one, comparing riding a camel to like riding a dragon. O'Toole would spend the other 6 months learning the Bedouin customs, culture, and the basics of their language. He would listen to the stories of Bedouins who actually fought with Lawrence, and he would spend his hours learning about the real T.E. Lawrence. In doing so, he learned a lot about the real man, and I believe the time he spent learning about Lawrence really helped him add to the character and enhance his performance. O'Toole did later comment that it was one of the hardest roles he ever had to play, and he was surprised that Lean wanted him to play it. It was a good thing that Lean chose O'Toole to play Lawrence, as O'Toole plays him so well it's hard to think of anyone else in that role.
It is written.
Nothing is written.
Playing Lawrence in Lawrence of Arabia would skyrocket Peter O'Toole's career into stardom. Another role that would skyrocket someone's career into stardom was the role of Sheriff Ali. It might surprise you to know that Omar Sharif wasn't the first, second, or even third pick to play the role of Sheriff Ali. The first pick for the role was actually a German-born actor, Horst Buchholz, who had just starred in The Magnificent Seven as Chico. The problem with Buchholz is he had already signed on to do Billy Wilder's 1, 2 and 3, and scheduling conflicts with that production made him drop out of the role of Sheriff Ali early. The next actor to be selected for the role was rising French star Alain Delon. Delon didn't work as Sheriff Ali, and he was quickly recast for another French actor, Maurice Ronnet. Ronnet seemed like a more solid choice for the role and flew out to Jordan for the filming. He was in Jordan for around 3 months, and out of those 3 months, he learned how to ride a camel and spent several weeks on location, rehearsing his lines and scenes. Lean was never a fan of Ronet's casting, and thought he was entirely wrong for the part. Ronnet spoke with a heavy French accent and didn't look good in Bedouin clothing. Ronnet also refused to wear brown contact lenses. That was the final straw for Lean, and he immediately started looking for a new actor to play Sheriff Ali. By this point, they were already filming in Jordan, so Lean decided to look through a photo book of English-speaking Arab actors and found Egyptian actor Omar Sharif. Sharif was completely unknown internationally, but was a star in his home country of Egypt and the rest of the Middle East. Spiegel went to go meet with him, and the two met in Cairo to talk about the part of Sheriff Ali. At the start of the meeting, Sharif wasn't really interested in the part, since Spiegel claimed that it was only a small part, but once he was told that the film was being directed by David Lean, he was more interested. Sharif was a big fan of Lean after seeing his previous film, The Bridge on the River Kwai. Sharif agreed to do some screen tests and flew out to Jordan where he met Lean, and he did some screen tests in Bedouin clothing with a fake mustache on. After the screen tests were done, he was told to go back to Cairo, where they would later contact him. Sharif didn't know what to expect, so just stuck it out and waited for a phone call. He did eventually receive a phone call where he was told to go to London, the whole time not knowing if he had the part of Sheriff Ali or not. In London, he was finally given the part and signed a 7-year contract with Columbia Pictures. I'm not entirely sure why they made him run around so much, but I guess that's just the nature of the entertainment business. When Renette found out that he had been recast 3 months into the production, he was understandably not happy and complained bitterly to Columbia Pictures. Columbia offered Renette 2 French films that they were producing and what would have been his full salary for the film in order for him to leave on amicable terms. Renette did accept the offer from Columbia and left the production. While we may never know how good Renette would have been as Sheriff Ali, I can say it was probably for the best. Omar Sharif's performance as Sheriff Ali is one of the best performances in the film.
What did you bring us here for with your blasphemous conceit? Hey, English blasphemer!
And for his first English language film, he does a remarkably good job.
Your hand away.
You love him.
No, I fear him.
Then why do you weep?
If I fear him and love him, how must he fear himself who hates himself?
It helps that Omar Sharif is an actual Arab and his accent lends itself nicely to the character, making the character seem a lot more authentic. Sharif's career, just like O'Toole's, would take off after starring in Lawrence of Arabia. Sharif would go on to star in many other epics, like Fall of the Roman Empire, Genghis Khan, and Dr. Zhivago, which is another David Lean film. Casting the role of Prince Faisal was a little bit easier, as Lean specifically wanted Alec Guinness to play the role. Lean initially considered Laurence Olivier, but decided to choose Guinness instead. Guinness had been in 3 of Lean's previous films before Lawrence of Arabia, with the most recent one being The Bridge on the River Kwai. Lean and Guinness were not always on the friendliest of terms, but they would try and put their differences aside for their work, something Guinness always took very seriously. After Guinness met with Omar Sharif and heard him speak with his Arab accent, he would take note and use Sharif's Arab accent for his portrayal of Prince Faisal.
Young men make wars, and the virtues of war are the virtues of young men. Courage and hope for the future.
Sharif was shocked when he heard Alec Guinness speaking with his accent, but was flattered that he would take his accent to try and give a more authentic portrayal. Another well-known British actor to join the cast was Jack Hawkins, portraying General Edmund Allenby. Hawkins had worked with Lean previously on The Bridge on the River Kwai as well. The two had gotten along great together while working on the film, and Lean wanted him in Lawrence of Arabia. Spiegel had wanted Cary Grant for the role of Allenby instead. Lean insisted on Hawkins and eventually got his way, with Hawkins being cast as Allenby. Hawkins plays Allenby extremely well.
Pound them, Charlie. Pound them.
And he plays him pretty close to the real Allenby. To properly portray Allenby and his balding hair, Hawkins went as far as having the hair on his head completely shaved off and having a hairpiece attached daily that would look like he was balding. Some other notable British actors in the cast were Claude Rains as Dryden. Rains had previously worked with Lean on his film The Passionate Friends, and Anthony Quayle as Colonel Brighton. Colonel Brighton was a made-up character for the film, and he is a combination of many different British officers who served with Lawrence in the revolt, most notably Colonel Newcomb. Anthony Quinn was brought in by Spiegel to play Auda Abutai. Spiegel wanted a big American star in the film because he knew having a recognizable American star in the film would make it a lot easier to attract the American audience. This wasn't unusual for the time, and still even happens today. Spiegel also had this done for The Bridge on the River Kwai, with William Holden being the big American star for that film. The other main American cast member was Arthur Kennedy as Jackson Bentley. Jackson Bentley is another made-up character for the film, but he is loosely based on Lowell Thomas, an American journalist that reported on T.E. Lawrence's role in the Arab Revolt. Kennedy wasn't actually the first choice for Jackson Bentley. Originally, Spiegel hired Edmund O'Brien to play the character, but after 3 weeks of shooting in Jordan, he took a break in America, and on his way back to Jordan, he suffered a heart attack. After his heart attack, O'Brien decided it was best for him not to risk his health, especially in the harsh desert climate, and dropped out of the production. While they were looking for someone to replace O'Brien, Anthony Quinn suggested Arthur Kennedy to Lean. The two had previously worked on Barabbas together, and not long after Quinn's suggestion, Kennedy was cast. The cast of Lawrence of Arabia was quite the international cast. Apart from the British and American actors and the already mentioned Egyptian actor Omar Sharif, you also had Puerto Rican actor Jose Ferrer as the Turkish Bey. Ferrer only worked on the film for 3 days and only had around 5 minutes of screen time. Despite that, he claimed it was his best acting in his entire career. There were also 2 Pakistani actors, I.S. Johar as Gassim and Zia Mohedin as Tafas. When it came to picking a cinematographer, Lean had a hard time. Lean originally wanted cinematographer Robert Surtees, who had just worked on Ben-Hur, and that was filmed in 65mm, which is what Lean was intending to film in. Unfortunately for Lean, Robert was unavailable, so Lean went with his next choice, Geoffrey Unsworth, who was also unavailable, so then he went with his next choice, Jack Hildyard, and he wasn't interested, and it went on with people either not being interested or unavailable. Eventually, Lean was left with few choices, and decided on Freddie Young. Young and Lean had previously worked together on Major Barbara, but arguments between the two led to Young being replaced by Ronald Neame. The two hadn't spoken to each other since then, and had avoided one another as much as they could. But with few options left, Lean decided to patch things up with Young, and after the two reconciled, Lean hired Young as cinematographer. It was a good thing that Lean decided to patch up their relationship, as without Young's cinematography, I don't think Lawrence of Arabia would have been as impressive. During pre-production, Young travelled to the Panavision offices and handpicked all of the camera equipment for the film. Panavision themselves even made special lenses for Young. Lawrence of Arabia was the first time Young was filming in Super Panavision 70, and he had to get to grips with the massive and extremely heavy cameras. Young knew he had his work cut out for him in the desert, especially with the heavy cameras that couldn't be moved easily. When it came to filming, Lean and Young were very different people. Young was always ready to shoot and got up early, while Lean was very slow and methodical, taking him a while to get started. This led to a number of arguments and fights, but the pair managed to keep it civil for most of the production, and it never got to the point where Lean wanted to fire Young. After working on Lawrence of Arabia, the two realised they actually both worked well together, despite their arguments. Young would later go on to work with Lean as cinematographer on Dr. Zhivago and Ryan's Daughter. One of the main goals of pre-production was finding filming locations. Lean and Spiegel discussed potential shooting locations for Lawrence of Arabia for ages, and many locations from the Sahara Desert to Israel were tossed around. But they both knew wherever they were going to shoot, it needed to have enormous sand dunes. This quickly narrowed down the locations, and with Lean's preference for shooting on location, it would need to be somewhere where they could capture the wide open expanse of the desert with Lean's now trademark style. While Lean and Spiegel knew there would be many hardships shooting in a desert, Lean was determined to shoot in one. After much discussion, Jordan was chosen as an ideal filming location. A couple of advantages Jordan had was it was actually where a lot of T. Lawrence's campaigns took place. Many parts of the country still hadn't been touched by industrialization, preserving the natural beauty of the landscapes. It had a monarchy and a government that was friendly to the idea of a film crew shooting in their country. To get permission to film in Jordan, Lean and Spiegel had to meet with the current king of Jordan, King Hussein, who was the great-nephew of King Faisal. To bridge the gap between the king and Spiegel, English politician Sir Anthony Nutting, who was a good friend of King Hussein, helped introduce Lean and Spiegel to the king. After many meetings with the king, they eventually got permission to film in Jordan. King Hussein was extremely cooperative and helpful to the production. He allowed the film crew to use the Royal Jordanian Army at a heavily discounted price. He also provided the use of the Royal Jordanian Air Force in the form of a Dakota DC-3, a DH-114 Hero, and a DH-104 Dove to transport supplies, cast, and crew to any location in the country at any time. King Hussein would periodically visit the set as well, mainly just to check up on the progress of the film, and also to sometimes meet some of his citizens who were working on the film. Ironically, even though King Hussein was supportive of the production, he would later ban the film from being screened in his country due to the supposed negative portrayal of Arabs and Arab culture in the film. Every other Arab country, apart from Egypt, would also ban the film for the same reason. While setting up for filming in Jordan, Spiegel would create 4 different camps for the production. 3 of them would be used for the actual production, while the other one would be designed as a mini resort for the cast and crew to get rest and relaxation from the difficult filming that was to come. The first one, named Horizon 1, was set up in the former embassy of Indonesia in Amman, the capital city of Jordan. Horizon 1 would function as the main office for Spiegel's Horizon Pictures, the company producing Lawrence of Arabia. Horizon 2 was set up in the city of Aqaba, the city Lawrence and the Arab revolt famously took. It was 200 miles away from Horizon 1, and Horizon 2 was a massive 67-acre camp that was built around an old British army barracks, which dated back to 1917 after T.E. Lawrence had captured the city. It was used as the main supply hub and equipment facility for storing all of the costumes and props. It also housed a construction area, a makeup station, and a publicity office. Contained within the camp were hundreds of tents that were the homes for the crew and general workers on the film. The people within Horizon 2 lived pretty comfortable lives, with the cast and workers having access to showers and flushable toilets which were built from scratch. The Royal Jordanian Air Force would use the aircraft given to the production to transport cast and crew members from Horizon 2 to Horizon 3. Horizon 3 was not a set camp like the other Horizon camps. Instead, it was set up in whichever part of the desert they were in. For the first 2 months, it was set up at Jebel Tubek. For the next 3 weeks after that, it was set up at El Jaffa. And for the final 2 months of filming in Jordan, it was set up at Wadi Rum. The conditions of the camp were a lot rougher from the other camps, due to its nature of needing to be constantly moved around. Horizon 3 consisted mostly of tents and Lean's caravan, but it did have a proper canteen and bar. The canteen would serve 5-course meals, and all of the food had to be flown in. Most of the food served there came from Beirut and Jerusalem. Every couple of weeks, more gourmet food would come in from London and Copenhagen. The film's caterer, Phil Hobbs, had to arrange for a cleaned-out 2,400-gallon fuel tanker to bring water from over 150 miles away, so the cast, crew, extras, and animals had something to drink at the camp, since there was no wells at the locations. It cost the production $3 per gallon.
More money.
How much more?
25,000 now, a lot more later.
Which would roughly be around $31.51 in today's money. Horizon 3 was required to be set up a couple of miles away from wherever they were filming, due to all of the vehicles and people destroying the natural look of the sand, and Lean wanted to keep the desert looking pristine. This was so it would appear untouched in the film and look like no one else had been there. The last camp, Horizon 4, also known as the Horizon Beach Camp, was built only a mile away from Horizon 2. The beach camp was set up directly on the shoreline of Aqaba, and it was built for the cast and crew to relax in the nice waters of the Gulf of Aqaba, taking breaks from the long filming days in the harsh desert climates out at Horizon 3. Most of the cast and crew members at Horizon 4 would be flying in and out from Horizon 2 and 3. It was built to have as many modern luxuries that were available at the time, having a fully fledged dining facility accompanied with a bar. It had a sports area for ping pong and darts. It also had a 16mm open-air cinema that would screen films every Saturday night. The tents at Horizon 4 were a lot more advanced than the ones at Horizon 2 or 3, and they were all equipped with air conditioners and mini refrigerators. While the base camp was being set up, Phyllis Dalton, who was the costume designer for the film, was busy researching clothing for both the British and the Arabs. She did sketches and looked at different materials to have costumes made out of. Once her research was done, she then started having the costumes made for the film. Starting with the British Army officers' uniforms. Most of them were made in London, either at Burnham's or Nathan's. Dalton had Peter O'Toole's and Jack Hawkins' uniforms custom made at Hawks on Savile Road. She did this because she wanted O'Toole's uniform to be made to look ill-fitting on him. Once the uniform was finished, she had it put through a washing machine and then had it beat a number of times. This was done in order to make it look even worse on O'Toole and show that Lawrence, in the film, was a misfit and didn't really fit into the army structure. In the scene with Lawrence talking to Allenby about taking Damascus, they had to show blood appearing on the back of Lawrence's uniform to show his wounds reopening from the stress and frustration with the Arab revolt and the British High Command. To do this, they used water paints and painted the back of the uniform to make it look like blood was seeping out. For Jack Hawkins' uniform, Dalton had Hawks specially make it because Hawks had someone working there who knew the real General Allenby and had previously made his uniforms. Once Dalton had finished having the British Army officers' uniforms made, she travelled over to Jordan with the rest of the crew to start working on the Arab clothing. Dalton did research and sketches on Arab and more specifically Bedouin clothing. She travelled to the markets in Jordan and Syria to look at the different materials and styles of clothing, picking out what she liked and combining pieces of clothing together to make the costumes. Dalton tried to make them look as close to what real Bedouin would have worn in the Arab revolt. She had Peter O'Toole's and Anthony Quinn's Bedouin clothing specially made in Syria, and Anthony Quinn's costume she made up herself. It wasn't based on any reference material of Bedouin clothing. Dalton did this because she liked the way the colours contrasted against the desert. For Lawrence's Bedouin clothing, Dalton had many versions made, and each version would be made out of thinner and thinner material until it was almost ghost-like in appearance. This was done to represent Lawrence's character fading over the course of the film. Omar Sharif had 12 copies of his costume made just because of how much sweat he would lose during filming in the desert heat. He had the hardest time since most of his costume was black. While the costume was black on the outside, it was white on the inside from all of the salt his body lost. Sharif would lose around 9 kilograms or 20 pounds over the course of filming. While in Jordan, Dalton also had 1,000 World War I British soldier uniforms made. 7 factories that used to make uniforms for the Royal Jordanian Army were used to make the 1,000 British uniforms. Interestingly, these uniforms would only be used in a handful of scenes. I wonder if they were made with the intention to be used in more scenes that were later scrapped. This concludes part 1 of the insane production behind Lawrence of Arabia. I hope you enjoyed the video and found out something new about this extraordinary film. Due to the length of the film and the amount of information I discovered during research, I have decided to split it into 2 parts. So part 2 will be out in the coming weeks and will focus on the jaw-dropping locations, the problems with filming in the desert, and how the film was edited and released in such a rushed state, along with some other minor topics like the extras and equipment. If you don't want to miss out on part 2, make sure you subscribe to the channel.